brought a bunch of stuff back, and it kind of made it into the hands of the rich and powerful because they were prized trinkets from some unknown society.
It's something really unique, you know, and kind of cool. So yeah, I could totally imagine.
I mean, that's interesting.
Like that.
And then that also helps to kind of alleviate, because the big problem with this, right, is that people just assume that this head signifies human contact and interaction between cultures that was previously undocumented. Yeah. Whether we totally buy into the like Columbus Cortez story of like, these are the two people who made the first contact. I don't.
No,
I mean,
probably
I don't
not.
think anybody in this room does, and probably most of the people who listen to the podcast don't buy into that. There was definitely European contact, whether it be Vikings, whether it be Celts, whether it be whoever, you know, that happened. That had to have happened before. There's some mysteries that I know we want to talk about that even help to kind of prove that a little bit.
Well, there's some mysteries that sort of kind of indicate that there was regular trade between the Americas and the Mediterranean. Yeah. Like, for example,
your mummies,
the cocaine mummies. You know, which I'm sure you've heard of. But just for our listeners, researchers were testing tissue samples from various Egyptian mummies, and they found traces of cocaine and nicotine in them. And, of course, the coca plant and the tobacco plant didn't exist anywhere in the Mediterranean back when those mummies were mummified. And so there's an honest to God mystery there. Was there actually trade, you know, between the Mediterranean and the Americas? And there's other alternate explanations for how that stuff got there.
Like everybody smoked in the museum, and they did a line of blow off of the mummy.
Well, I mean, there's lots of stuff. We'll probably do an episode. We'll do an episode someday about this, because I have all kinds of theories about it.
Well, another thing that we'll do an episode on probably is the Piri Reis map.
Yeah, Piri Reis.
Yeah, that is, you know, a really interesting map from 1513 or something like that.
It is based on 200 years of other maps.
Yeah, that like shows some stuff that technically it shouldn't show. I mean, I think there's strong evidence for there being trade, whether it was like Roman or otherwise, between Europe and the Mediterranean and America.
Maybe that's one of the sad things about the ancient world, is that they were always having wars, and they were always sacking cities and leveling them and burning the libraries. Like, you know,
I was gonna say everything was lit with fire.
I know. It's like there could have been ancient records in the Library of Alexandria, for example. You know, that tell the whole story of all this.
Probably.
And then it all got just vanished. It's a shame.
So one of the other ideas is that this head could have been traded in Asia, with the kind of European Asian trade, and then brought through trade routes with Asia, and then across the Pacific Ocean. I don't think that's particularally viable.
The chipping is still an issue. That's quite a distance for this thing to have been packed up in a crate and never touched.
Yeah, you're talking an even longer distance than the whole Rome to Viking land and across, and then
I can't get anything from the Pottery Barn to my house without a chip.
Well, that's because you're buying Pottery Barn.
But hey, I got good taste, okay? It's quality. It's all quality.
You got a good registry is what you got.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, kind of back to the shipwreck thing, we do know that Rome had, stuff in the Canary Islands, stuff like that. So they were further out than originally anticipated. So something could have floated over there. And originally thought, like 50 years ago, we thought, whatever. Okay. No, they were nowhere. Then now we're like, they were everywhere. What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, they were definitely on the Canary Islands. They found a trading post out there.
Yeah.
And I could picture, even if they didn't intentionally, maybe they got caught in a storm and driven across the ocean.
Exactly.
And shipwrecked on the shores of the New World.
Yeah, or even on an island kind of close to the New World. I mean, you get like slammed on the Bahamas or something like that. It's totally possible that people are going out there all the time, and then there's trading happening there. You know? So, okay, interesting discussions about it not being a hoax, right? Let's talk about maybe this not being totally real.
Yeah,
I kind of like this one. This one really cracks me up.
And I just wanted to reiterate that it could actually have made its way. Again, we had an 18-year window there, possibly, that this tomb was sealed up possibly as late as 1510. So, it totally could have just come across some with Columbus or somebody else and then wind up there.
Cortez, yeah, it totally could have just come across and then been a gift, like one of the first gifts, because this was a tomb of a king, right? I mean, this was a tomb of a person who was in charge of this area, and so it would be something that you would expect a European to give, hey, here's our gift of offering or a peace offering.
And it's novel to them.
Yeah, and it's totally weird and cool. Yeah. But also, I guess it doesn't explain realistically why, they have this piece of from 200 CE pottery.
It could have been painted. It's a lot of pottery. That's the thing, is a lot of that kind of stuff was painted, and that the thing is not all that impressive in its current state. But if it had been painted well and gaudy colors or bright colors, it would have been quite interesting.
Or a little gold leaf or something.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, things that rub off when it's wet and in the ground. But
that's like, I got to describe this thing. It looks to me like the head of a lawn gnome.
It does.
It does.
Yeah. It has a shorter hat, but it kind of does. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay,
let's talk about
hoaxes. This being a hoax. And we're not saying like it never existed. This is a made up story.
Yeah.
To be clear.
Yeah.
We're just saying like there are some.
According to the internet, it's a real thing. So
it might not have been.
It is actually in a museum somewhere.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's been a subject of peer-reviewed studies, I guess. But according to a informal declaration by a guy by the name of Paul Schmidt, who's an archaeologist at UNAM.
What's UNAM?
The National Autonomous University of Mexico. We've talked about UNAM before. We talked about UNAM when we were talking about the Bermeja Island.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Bermeja.
Yeah, so sorry for assuming that you would remember what UNAM was, but UNAM...
Always talking about UNAM.
So according to Mr. Schmidt, the head was planted in the site by they call it participating archaeologist, Hugo Medano, who I understand was kind of like an
He's a student or a low level.
Yeah, lower level.
The guy with the toothbrush.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. The Buster Bluth. Chink. Anyway, according to Schmidt, Hugo wanted to play a practical joke, and he placed this head in this site to be discovered, and it kind of backfired on him because they were like, "Oh my god, this is so cool!"
Like everybody was ha ha ha. There's no way that's real, and instead everybody's like, "Oh my god, my career is made."
Yeah.
That is part of the reason. Yeah, apparently he just didn't have the heart to break it to what's his name, Morano. Was it Morano that? Payon. Yeah, he just didn't have the heart because he was so enthralled by his find.
Well, according to a lot of other people, these are totally fake allegations. There's no way to confirm it because no way to confirm it because everybody involved is dead at this point.
Yeah, this was 1933, right?
Yeah, you can't just reach out.
And I know that you've got some stuff about this, but the process of documentation left a lot to be desired.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
I know.
So I guess for me, the only thing is that seems like a really to take an artifact, right, that is genuinely old. There's no doubt in anyone's mind that this is a genuinely really old artifact. To somehow have this artifact.
Yeah, where the hell did you get it to begin with?
Right. So to somehow have this seriously old artifact and just be like, oh, I know what will get them. I'll sneak in the night and place this in the dig site, and they'll then they'll see. For me, I keep picturing somebody just being heh and tossing it on lunch break, tossing it into. I know that's probably not how everybody's picturing.
Wait, is this like that episode of the Brady's where they find the tiki head? They're walking along and trip over it.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. But I mean, why would this student have this head to begin with?
Well, he must have pilfered it out of the archives.
I mean, must have, right?
I mean, that's the only way you could have got hold of something that was of proper age.
But then it was never documented that it was missing.
Well, a lot of museums have tons of stuff that's not on display. It's just buried in crates,
to be sorted later.
Yeah, and so I can see why you could totally swipe something like that.
Yeah. So the other thing that could have happened is that a student could have accidentally placed this head into the collection with the stuff from the Mexico City.
That was in the museum. Yeah.
Accidentally placed it because I didn't mention this before.
Oh, the misfiling. Is that what you're getting at? It was misfiled, essentially?
Yeah, but so the thing I didn't say before is that although this was reportedly discovered in the 1933 dig, Payon didn't actually ever say anything about the head until the 1960s. So there's a total possibility that he just went to look at his collection and was like, oh, that's weird. There's that head there. Huh. Because in the 1930s, to quote my coworker again, as soon as I said, she said, when was this discovered? And I said, 1933. And she said to me, oh, archaeology in the 1930s was shady as...
Yeah, have you never seen an Indiana Jones movie?
Yeah.
I love the way he goes into the sacred temple and just steals all the gold and runs out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Jones.
I mean... For her, especially, you know, and I'll tell you some more stuff that she was kind of talking about later, but Payon wasn't on site 80% of the time. He had his students working on this dig. And because of that, there's almost no documentation. Single photo that I can find of this dig site. There's no documentation, as far as I can find, of this excavation. You know, usually... when you're doing an excavation, you're drawing detailed diagrams.
That's why they do the grids, the string
you're doing
grid.
Grids. Yeah, you're like making note of everything. Everything you're finding, you're taking pictures. Every time you find something, every time you destroy something, you're taking a picture so that you can say, here's my proof that I found this.
That's why
I found it.
That's why there's so many sites that are like only like 1 or 2% excavated.
Yeah,
because it takes a
long
long time.
Yeah. The quote that she said, which I think is like great, right? Is she says, the number one thing you have to know about archaeology is that it's destructive. In order to recover artifacts, you have to tear through the land. And if you don't document and draw and photograph every last speck of the site, you can't argue anything. There's no do-overs in archaeology. Context is everything, and an artifact isn't important unless it's found in relation to things, which is so true.
Totally makes sense, yeah.
Right? So we're taking on faith, pretty much we're taking on the word of students in the 1930s, who may or may not have been actually students, that they found this head with all this other stuff. But it's totally possible that this head was found in Italy, for all we know, and it had been misfiled and placed with this collection. But since there's no pictures, no documentation, no nothing, and Payon didn't talk about it until the 1960s, that leads me to believe that he didn't even know it existed until he went to go view the collection and thought, that doesn't seem right. Maybe they did find it. Okay, that's interesting. Weird. Let's talk about that.
You know what this makes me think of?
What?
So, you guys know this, that, you know, I grew up in Southern Oregon, and there is a lot of native tribes that lived in the area because it was just chock full of rivers, and it's all silty ground, and if you go to the right areas, for years, people would always be digging around looking for arrowheads.
Yeah, I did that when I was a kid.
And what really cracked me up is it was a known thing to go to, you know, the areas where we're just outside of it that the tourists would be and say, oh, well, this is an Umpqua arrowhead found at this site, and this is this kind of arrowhead found at that site, and blah, blah, blah. And for $1.50, it can be yours. And see, this is where they tied it on. And people would be like, oh, wow, this is great. And they'd tell their children, and they'd be passed down through histories, look at this great arrowhead that I bought that was found from this site. And really what it was is it was Jim Bob down the street with an angle grinder and some rocks, and he was grinding them and chipping them and making fakes
that's easy enough to do.
Dated correctly if you just dated the material. Like, it makes me think of, oh, wow, this would have just been so easy to just throw in the mix. And
I guess for me, from all of the things that I've seen, people pretty much agree that this is a genuine ancient artifact.
Yeah.
And that's why I say throw in the mix. I'm not saying that some guy made it with an angle grinder in the shop.
But it would be pretty easy for the amount of oversight and like burden of proof that we've got with this thing. It would be so easy for somebody to just be like, I know. Or somebody to be like, I don't know, it's in the box. It's probably part of it.
Yeah, but my only
like
problem
IKEA
with
furniture.
Yeah,
but the thing about it is that it's not. It doesn't appear to be a native artifact. And so how did it wind up in the museum where it could actually get accidentally mixed in with these objects from that tomb?
Yeah, I don't know.
Collections get shared.
Yeah, I mean, that could have been it. It could have been left over from something from some other museum that they just didn't happen to return. I mean, maybe.
I mean, things you got to remember is, that era was kind of volatile for institutions. Things would spring up and collapse pretty quick, and so somebody could have amassed a collection and said, I'm now going to donate it to this museum because that's in my will and testament, and then it goes to that museum, which then that museum instantly folds, and their stuff is just then shuttled to some other museum. I mean, that's an easy process, and that kind of stuff happened all the time.
Yeah, no, it's a little easier in this case to suppose that it was just human incompetence or carelessness that caused this whole thing, rather than ancient trade.
For me, like, the thing I keep picturing is, you've got your, minimum wage assistant helping to set up this exhibition, and they've got their gloves on, and, they're placing stuff, and they think, okay, I got to take that head away next. Right? And then they're like, oh, just kidding, it's 5. Okay, I'll do that tomorrow. But tomorrow comes and they're not there. It's the other.
Or they're hungover.
Or, whatever. Or they just, forget, right? And that head, they're like, okay, yeah, that's probably part of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of other stuff here. It's probably part of it. But I guess, for me, it's so hard because there's just no documentation on this thing. And I really wish there was. And that's why it's an unsolved mystery. 100%. The reason for this being an unsolved mystery is not because we couldn't. This is one of those ones, right, where it's like, if they had just taken a couple dang pictures of that site, we would know exactly what was happening.
Or for Payon, when he originally pulled all the many things out of this grave, if they had just made an inventory.
Yeah.
We
could even know if it was even in the original grave or not.
Yeah,
that's one huge question. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it opens up some other questions of well, how did it get there if it was a part of that grave? But by and large, for me, it's just there's so many questions, and it's frustrating because if due course or due process had been followed, we would know the answer. Helpful.
Yeah, so there are many ways it could have gotten into that grave or gotten into that collection. We just don't know where it got in along the line.
Okay, well, what do you think, Steve?
I still think that it was probably local.
Mexico?
Yeah, and I still think that it's probably from the region.
Okay, and it was part of the original burial, and they totally found it.
Yeah, I feel like it probably wasn't inserted just because of the age of it.
Sure, yeah.
It just seems like it's in too good of shape to have gone through anything else, because most artifacts that are dug up are not in good shape.
Yeah,
but you gotta,
especially Europe, like Roman and European-based stuff like that. It's never in good shape. It's rarely in good shape because their cities always got sacked. Their stuff always got tossed around.
Oh, yeah. Of course, the thing is, if it was made locally, it must have been kept in something the equivalent of a museum itself to have survived so many years. I mean, we're talking a long, long time before this thing finally got put into somebody's grave. Mm-hmm.
Well, we might be.
Yeah.
According to that thermoluminescence dating, it could have been as late as 12.
So the thing
that still centuries.
The thing that we haven't talked about though is that it's possible that it wasn't the first time that it was put in somebody's grave.
So they exhumed another grave, took it back out.
Grave robbing is an old practice.
Yeah.
And it could be that somebody said, we don't have a big enough hall to honor the king. Bob down the road, nobody liked him anyway. He was Bob the jerk ruler, so we're going to go ahead and rob his stuff. Yeah. And then they went in and carted it all out and dumped it in the new one. And
I guess the other frustration for me is that since we don't really know how this was the head a little more buried than everything else? And if so, is it possible that it was
was maybe it wrapped even in cloth?
Well, maybe it was even like a child's toy that got buried years before this newer civilization came in, and they built their pyramid above it and then used it as a traditional. There's so many possibilities here that just
Well, yeah,
kids leave their toys everywhere.
They do.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's going to have to stay a mystery.
I think so too. So we'll post probably both of the pictures that exist of this.
Yeah.
As well.
That's a lot of searching.
As well as some of our research, and I'm gonna just preemptively apologize for like the background color of some of these websites that I'm gonna post.
Well, by the way, in the pictures, I'm going to Photoshop a ruler into that. Just so you can get some idea.
Just for fun.
We'll Photoshop in about 5 of them.
Yeah.
At different scales.
Just rotate. And,
or maybe I'll Photoshop a beer can or something like that. Yeah,
something like that, yeah. Anyway, you can find all that stuff on our website. That website is thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. You can obviously listen to us on iTunes. If you're listening to us on iTunes, you should, subscribe and rate and review. You may be listening to us on some other, of the tons of streaming sites. If you're doing that, you should leave us a comment and a rating, or a review and a rating if you can, and subscribe if you can. Those are all the ways that people find us. Obviously. Yeah, more people that do that pushes it up. I know find us. As of the date of this recording, that's happened enough that there's one of the sites that streams this has sent us an email and we're being featured because of it. So
pretty awesome.
It's great. Yeah. We've got some social media if you want to connect with us. To be clear, we run our own social media, so you are literally interacting with us unless you hit the mod team on Facebook. And you'll know if you hit the mod team because you're doing something bad. Yeah. Love the mod team, though. On Facebook, we've got the group and the page. We're Thinking Sideways. Actually, we're Thinking Sideways Podcast. We're on Twitter. We're Thinking Sideways. We've got the subreddit, which is Our Thinking Sideways. I know this is like all shock to you that we might have those handles. Crazy. Mm-hmm. It was not cheap to secure those handles. It was actually super cheap. It was actually free, 100% free. If you have comments, concerns, just suggestions, anything that warrants a discussion, you can give us an email. That email address is thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com. We do try to respond to all. We've used to say that we respond to everything. Now we're saying we try to respond to everything because sometimes we just can't. Yeah. We've been getting a lot of email lately, and we just don't have the capacity to, unfortunately, respond to everything. So sorry, guys. Yeah, we try. We try really hard. If you want to support the show, you can do that in a couple ways. You can buy merchandise. There's shirts, mugs, stickers, lamps, swag in general. Swag. Those are on Zazzle and Redbubble. Those are linked on our website. You can do a one-time donation on PayPal. Their link is there. As well as you can do a continuous or reoccurring donation on Patreon, which is patreon.com/thinkingsideways. And that's usually like a pay per episode. We're not charging you for episodes. We're just saying you will donate per episode. And it's totally voluntary. Totally voluntary. Thank you to everybody who's been donating through both Patreon and PayPal. It's been amazing. Yeah, you guys are like really doing a great job, helping us with the show. We're not... unlike some podcasts that are out there, we're not trying to make a living on this thing. We're not trying to make money on it. We're genuinely just trying to support our really expensive hobby. Yeah. So, thanks, everyone. Yeah. And I guess that's it for this, I think so. Week. Yeah, so we should head on out. I was literally just going to make that joke. No. Oh, yeah, I saw that coming. Oh, damn it. Bye, guys. Yeah, toodaloo. Hey guys, Steve here. You are listening to one of our original 26 episodes. If you've listened to any of our new episodes, you're going to notice that we're sounding a little different and these have been remastered. Because they had a really annoying hum. Yeah, I mean, a huge thanks to listener James for doing almost all of the legwork on this thing. Yeah. You'll also notice if you had listened to what we're calling the Lost 26 episodes before, and you're re-listening now, the music and sound effects are gone. Yes, we've gone back to straight audio. So be warned, we sound a little different today than we do in what you're about to listen to. Yeah. Enjoy. Bye. Okay, bye. Thinking Sideways. I don't understand.
Hi there. Thanks for joining the show again. This is Thinking Sideways, the podcast, and I am Steve. As always, I'm joined by Joe.
Hello.
And Devin.
Hi.
And we have decided to give you a little bit of a holiday extra since it is Halloween. We're going to pull around the campfire. We're going to tell a creepy story.
Yeah, we're pretty excited. We don't usually do this.
No, this one's a little out of our ballpark, but that's okay. So well, actually, before we get into the show, I do want to say something for our listeners. This story, ladies and gentlemen, that we're going to go into has some pretty graphic details in it, and it's got a lot of violence in it. So if you're not into that thing, or you're going to be listening to the show and there's some kids around or younger folk, you might want to just skip this show because it's probably not the style that you want to go into. Okay, well, tonight we are going to talk about what is referred to as the Texarkana Moonlight Murders.
Texarkana.
Yes.
Isn't that, didn't they base a movie on that? The town that dreaded sundown.
The town that lives in fear, I think it's called.
I thought it was the town that dreaded sundown.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't actually.
I haven't either. I've been through Texarkana on a train. And I can tell you that when you stop at what seems to be the train station and then go, the building seems to transition into a jail. So I don't know if that's real or not, but in my mind, Texarkana is the place where the train station is the same building as the jail.
Could be.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so here's the story.
In the spring of 1946, there were a series of fairly grisly murders were committed, most about 3 to 4 weeks apart, and eventually put the whole town of Texarkana into a tremendous state of terror, with people buying guns and nailing their windows shut and buying Doberman pinchers to guard the house. The slayer was never caught. He was eventually nicknamed the Phantom Killer. Alternatively, he was called the Phantom Slayer. It's unknown why he killed these people, and it's unknown if he committed other murders besides this or what. It's all just a big mystery.
Because they never caught the killer.
Yeah.
That's the scary part. Mm-hmm. One of the scary parts.
One of the many scary parts
of this very scary story.
Although it's possible, sometimes in series of crimes like this, the killer does get caught, but for another crime. It might very well be that this guy went away for something else, and that's why the murders stopped.
That's a possibility, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we totally are.
Yeah. So let's talk about the attacks.
Yeah.
The first attack took place on February 22nd around midnight, 1946. The first victims were Jimmy Hollis, who was 24, and his girlfriend, Mary Jean Larry. Now, what do you do when you're in a small town and you want to get away? They were parked out on Lover's Lane. They were going to have a secluded evening together. They'd been there about 10 minutes when suddenly somebody knocked on the window. Jimmy looked up and he thought it was going to be a cop, but instead he saw a guy wearing a white hood pointing a gun at his face. And he said, "Fella, you got me mixed up with someone else. You've got the wrong man."
I gotta say that's pretty cool demeanor on his part. If I see somebody with a gun and a white hood, I wouldn't be saying, "Oh, you got me mixed up with somebody else." I'd be handing him my wallet or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that's the first thing you would think. But this suspect had what we now are pretty sure is a .32 caliber handgun pointing at him, and he said, "I don't want to kill you, fellows, so do what I say." He then proceeded to order them both to get out of the car. And the quote, which was taken from the police report, says, "Take off your bleeping britches." At which point his girlfriend, Mary Jean, said, basically, "Please do what he says. Just do what he says." So he goes ahead and he takes off his pants. But while he's bent over taking off his pants, he gets clubbed in the head. He gets hit so hard, the noise is so loud that his girlfriend Mary thinks that he's actually been shot. So he got hit with that much force.
Yeah, and it turned out that it was actually his skull cracking.
Yes, it was his skull cracking. He got hit. That's really hard.
That's super hard.
Apparently his skull was cracked in 3 places.
Yeah. Which not something I'd want to have happen.
No.
So what happens here is our assailant then, of course, pulls his wallet out, Jimmy's wallet out, and goes through it and discovers he doesn't have any money and gets a little upset and starts talking to Mary and is upset about it. She says, no, I'm sorry, he has no money. At which point he's sure that she has a purse, and she says, well, no, I don't have a purse. And he doesn't believe her. He thinks that